Just joining us at 6:30. Just give everyone a few more minutes to arrive and get settled in. All right, everyone, welcome. Good evening. This is the BCCI meeting. We're glad you're here. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Due to recent changes to Oregon Public Meetings Law, our meetings will now be recorded. Once the video is processed by the city's web team, it will be published on our board's webpage for public viewing. All public attendees are invited to participate in the meeting at the designated opportunities. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, use the raise hand feature and to indicate, and we will unmute your microphone, or you can unmute yourself and share. And you can always use the chat feature at any time to submit a question, and we will keep an eye on that and make sure you're recognized. All right. According to the agenda, I think we only have one guest today. That would be Rob Zoeller. Are there any other guests or attendees? I see Ramona Crocker is hanging out in the attendee area. Miles, can you promote her back to the committee?
I'd like to state for the record that there are two Eric Schmidts on tonight. If you'll look at the name tag, Joe borrowed my link.
Yeah, right. Sorry about that. I had the link and it disappeared. So Eric sent me his.
We get 2 votes, Joe.
There you go.
But Joe doesn't get any.
Right.
Okay. Any other attendees or guests? No? Okay, then we'll just go straight to Rob for the Housing Options Project presentation. You have until 7:10.
Oh, great. That's actually more than I was planning on, so maybe I won't have to rush so much. Let me pull this up. And, oh, there we go. So everyone can see this? Okay, great. Well, I know you've heard about this project for a couple of years now, so it's exciting to actually be able to have some ideas to talk about. Before we get started, I'll make a couple of announcements that I'll cover on the next slide. And then I'll just briefly recap some of the project background. And then we'll take a look at the 3 alternatives. And that will lead us into a brief discussion. And what I really want to do is just kind of concentrate on the pros and cons of those alternatives. And because this is going to be so brief, I do want to remind people that there is a virtual open house now. You can, it went live Friday night and it should be open till Friday, June 11th. There's a lot more information on the website. You will see more on the website than you will get in this presentation because of the time limitation. And there is a survey at the end. And we'd love to hear what you think of it. And we'd also appreciate if you can share with everyone you think might be interested in this, your NACs, other community groups. Please share widely. And on Wednesday, there will be a live open house at 6 p.m. That's essentially a presentation where I will we'll have like a Q&A period afterwards. That is citywide, everyone is invited. And the details are on the open house website. I mean, they're on our project page. And You can submit questions in advance if you're interested. Even if you can't attend, you can still submit some questions in advance. So just to recap what this project is about, this project is looking to consider where and how we can allow additional housing types at a range of sizes and price levels in residential neighborhoods. That includes everything from ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes to townhouses, cottage clusters, and small courtyard apartments. And one of the reasons why it's been difficult to allow these housing types, why we don't see these housing types in other areas, is because our land use map is divided into single family and multifamily zones. The areas in light yellow are where we allow single family homes only for the most part. And in the dark gold, light brown areas are where we have multifamily zones. That's a much smaller land area. And the reason this is usually, there are many reasons why this can be an issue, but something we like to highlight is that lately we've been trying to use a racial equity lens to evaluate this project. And when we look at where communities of color live, we find that they're usually concentrated in these multifamily areas. And we have large areas of land in the city that are significantly white. In this map that you're looking at, outlined in blue, inside those boundaries, about 84% of the population is white, which is remarkable considering we're a city known for its diversity. And I know you've heard about House Bill 2001 a couple of times. I'll just remind you that it essentially affects duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, townhouses, and cottage clusters. So it's not the full range of housing options in this project, but it is most of them. And state law requires us to allow duplexes on every lot and the other housing types on most lots in most neighborhoods. So when we look at these options later, that's something to keep in mind, is that it's state law. So that part we pretty much have to do. And what we hope to accomplish by the end of this project is to encourage more racially diverse and mixed income neighborhoods. That can mean different things, but to start, we hope it means more opportunities for people to live in their neighborhoods of choice, more options for multi-generational families, and we'll also be taking a look at strategies to minimize potential displacement. And we're about halfway through this project. We're at the end of phase 2. So the idea after the next couple of months of engagement is that we would work with Planning Commission and Council to recommend one of these paths for future development. I'm going to present 3. It is possible to mix and match some features of different approaches, so we don't necessarily have to choose one in its entirety, but we can modify them. But that being said, there are some tensions within them, so there are limitations to what we can mix and match. And that brings us to the actual alternatives. So there are 3 paths we're looking at. And the reason these came to be, they essentially came down to a lot of engagement we conducted in 2018 and 2019. And there were 3 main themes that emerged from that engagement. The first is that people wanted more flexibility with what they could do. So the first option prioritizes flexibility. The second one responds to the fact that there are a lot of environmental concerns. There are people worried about loss of trees, climate change, loss of habitat connectivity, things like that. And the third one is based on neighborhood context, or essentially the design of existing neighborhoods. It takes into account what's there, and it tries to create development and design standards that that help new homes look, kind of match the scale of what's already there to the extent that we can allow. And there are a lot of things to know about these different options, but what I would like you to think about on the following slides are three things. What are potential building sizes? How much parking does each provide? And what are the differences in front and backyards or open space? Because each of these alternatives is going to differ on these three factors, and where there is tension is where we're going to have to make decisions about what to prioritize. And before I get into the actual images, I want to just show you a picture of what a single detached house looks like in a typical residential neighborhood now. This is just a ranch I selected from Highland, I think. Right now, we only limit building size by lot size and building height. That means, you know, they're not bigger. People could usually build much bigger than they are, and they usually don't fill out the maximum building envelope. In terms of parking, the city requires one parking space. Many homes provide more, but the requirement is one. And we have no open space standards. So that's essentially, I want you to picture this house and this lot size as we start to look at other housing types. And this is just showing like an aerial view of a 7,000 square foot lot. So when I show you these other housing types, we're always going to use a 7,000 square foot lot as an example. That brings us to the first alternative. We call it the high opportunity approach. And the idea is to provide maximum flexibility. So this means property owners could, they would have as many restrictions lifted. All housing types would be allowed to be built everywhere. The size of newer homes is less constricted, which means we're going to see, which we would predict that we would see larger buildings on these lots. And the city would not have minimum parking. That doesn't mean people can't add it, but it just means that we wouldn't require it. And this is what the new zoning map could look like. I know it's hard to comprehend changes in zoning based on one image, but what I can tell you is that for all three options, R1, our higher density zone, essentially stays the same for the most part. And it's everything below R1 that would change. And this one has what we're calling a high opportunity small lot. That's closer to what we have for like R2. And then high opportunity medium lot, which would have a minimum lot size of about 3,500. That's much lower than it is now. And you'll see images later of a house on a 3,500 square foot lot, just to paint a picture. I've put a note on here that I encourage you to go to the open house website to read more about these. And then you can see the lot sizes, and you can download higher resolution maps. And I mentioned the third zone, the one with like the lightest yellow here, would have a minimum square lot size of 3,500 square feet. And on the left, I just wanted to show you what it would look like if we allowed housing types in those areas. You'll notice lots greater than 3,500 square feet are that lavender color. It's almost everywhere. It's probably about 90% of lots. And to illustrate what housing types could look like under this, I'm choosing a quadplex. Quadplex because it's harder to get on the lot, so it forces you to make more difficult decisions. And this is what a quadplex could look like on a 7,000 square foot lot. You'll see it's 3 stories. It's fairly large. We have not required parking or open space, and so it's possible that the building could fill up a larger portion of the building envelope. I've set this building back 20 feet from the side property line. That's because if there's any chance these might be sold in the future, there needs to be a 20-foot easement. But theoretically, if these were rentals, then the building could be in that zone. And so that's the first one. Now we're moving on to the second alternative. The idea here is to limit the size and shape of new homes to reduce the impacts of climate change. Essentially, what's the defining feature of this is smaller home sizes, and smaller home sizes use less energy typically. So that would be one thing that's better for the environment. We would allow some parking, but we wouldn't require a lot. And we would have open space minimums to try to make sure there's more green space on these lots. This map is a bit more straightforward because it essentially mirrors the zoning map we have now. I mean, there are different names here to illustrate the idea, but the boundaries of this map match the existing zoning map that we have now. A minimum lot size would shift in some areas, but the boundaries for the most part would stay the same. And what's different from alternative 2 and 1 is that here we could start to use minimum lot size for certain housing types. So we could say, for example, that even though there's a minimum lot size for each zone, we would require triplexes to be on 5,000 square foot lots or greater, and quadplexes on 7,000 square foot lots or greater in every zone. It's still a large part of the city area. This does conform with state law. So we can't really we can't raise this any higher, but this is as high as we could go if we wanted to have minimum lot sizes for those housing types. And again, we're looking at a quadplex on a 7,000 square foot lot. Now, we've reduced how big the building can be. And now you can see that this one is about 2 stories. And we've required open space so that there might be a larger yard on the side and the rear. Maybe you're able to preserve more trees. And there would be 2 parking spaces per development up front. I don't get into the details in this presentation, but there are state limits on what we can require for parking. Generally, the highest, it gets fairly detailed, but the highest is usually 1 parking space per unit. We cannot require more than 1 parking space per unit. And the third one brings us to the neighborhood context approach. The idea here is based on design. Now, alternative 1, based on flexibility. Alternative 2, the environment. 3, design. This looks at what's already existing in neighborhoods, and it tries to create development and design standards that are based on what's already there. So in older areas of the city, which is usually, West Slope, Denny Whitford, Raleigh West, Vose, Central Beaverton, we have a lot more single-story homes or split-level ranches. And the idea would be that we lower building height for new homes in that area so that they're closer to what's already there. But in other areas of the city where home construction has produced taller buildings on smaller lots, usually west, we would allow taller buildings. Now, there's, I'll show you some images on the following slide to illustrate this point, but we're trying to allow the same housing size on each lot. So there are consequences to that, and I'm going to hold off until we get to those diagrams. But this map is now looking at what happens if we now rezone these areas, and then what would that look like? So I mentioned older areas of the city, we have more single-story development, split-level ranches, houses like that. Those are in the light brown gold area. And then as you slowly move west, we get to newer construction where buildings are taller. And this is, again, looking at a quadplex on a 7,000 square foot lot. Now, this is where I want you to think about what are the pros and cons of this approach, because we've lowered the building height. We're still restricting the size somewhat, but not as much in the environmental approach. So we have medium-sized homes, but because we've lowered the height and we have a fairly deep setback, front setback, so that it matches what you're seeing on the street, that means the house is allowed to go deeper into the setback. This example has a 5-foot setback that is very different than what exists today. Also, we've now allowed 4 parking spaces instead of 2. Now you can see what happens with 2. We had basically a short driveway up front, room for open space. Now we have to pave most of the lot. Our parking standards require the driveway to be set back a minimum distance from the side property line. It usually has to be 20 feet wide, and there needs to be room to turn around. That's what happens when you go from 2 to 3 parking spaces. It's a significant jump in paved area. And this is looking now at this same alternative, but now we're looking at newer areas west of the city. Now, because so many homes are 2 to 3 stories, building heights for this area could be taller, which means it doesn't have to go quite as deep into the setback, and you have a little bit more open space. It's essentially the same size. And again, we're allowing up to 1 parking space per unit. That's the maximum we're allowed to accept, to propose. So how do they differ? I'm going to show you a few differences on the next couple of slides. The first one I'll point out for high opportunity, minimum lot size is dropping significantly to 3,500 square feet. That would be that's the largest lot size for that alternative. Now in the top right image, you can see an existing Beaverton development with single detached homes on 3,500 square foot lots. So that's what you might be able to expect. Whereas alternatives 2 and 3, ecological footprint and neighborhood context, they start to use minimum lot size as a standard for triplexes and above. We can't do that for duplexes, but we can do it for triplexes and quadplexes. And in the middle, we're looking, these are all Beaverton images of single detached homes on 5,000 square foot lots. And then in the bottom one, we start to see what a house looks like on 7,000 square foot lots. And now I just wanted you to have a chance to see these all on the same screen. Again, alternative 1, the theme is flexibility. We've assumed the house could be quite large and there's no parking. Alternative 2, we're limiting home size the most, and we're now seeing open space and tree preservation. But with 3, we're saying, but what if we want more parking? Let's let people have the maximum. Well, we're losing most open space, but now there's room to have garages and driveways on the site. And these are the same ideas, but for those who prefer looking at site plans, we just wanted you to be able to reference what this looks like. It's pretty easy to compare where we go from no open space to the most to very little. And you can see where there is parking and where there is not parking. And I think I've recapped this, on the other couple slides, but before I get into the discussion questions, I just wanted you to see the benefits and disadvantages on one screen. Again, alternative 1, larger homes, flexibility, no parking. Alternative 2, smaller units, outdoor space. And alternative 3, medium-sized units, you get the most parking. And that is, those are pretty much the alternatives. So there's a lot to unpack in all of them. So I just wanted us to have one question. I'm happy to answer more, but essentially what I would like to hear from you is, I mentioned in the beginning, it's helpful to think of the differences on 3 main levels: allowed home size, parking, and open space. So what do you think the benefits of some of these approaches are? And also, what concerns you when you look at these? I can go back to certain slides. If you'd rather, if you know the questions, I can put them in I can put the questions in the chat and I could keep this up, or we can just stay on here. It's your call. So I'll take questions now.
Looks like Frosty was the first one with his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rob, I'd like to thank you for raising my value of my house that I've spent a lifetime trying to earn money to buy by at least 10%, and put homes that people might want to buy out of their reach. My wife's in real estate, and there was a home, and I mentioned this in last month's meeting in Greenway, that was probably 1,900 square foot, single level, that was on the market for $470, which was, I thought was amazing. It sold for $150,000 over that. And a lot of that has to do with Portland and the garbage can it's become, where people are moving out of there. And I've got 5 grandsons that are, 2 of them are in the starting to, in the job market, and there's no way they can afford any of this stuff. And so you talk about affordable housing, the first thing we've got to do is clean up Portland, number 1. And then 2, get better schools so these people that are coming out of these schools have jobs. And I'm just so frustrated with the government trying to manage everything, when really you've got to develop the educational system and provide opportunities for people to have the education and the opportunities that are there for them to earn money so they can buy these things. And by jamming everything in there, you're actually increasing the demand for homes that are traditional homes, that single family homes that are going to be out of reach for almost everybody. I just don't see some common sense in this stuff. Yes, you need to have, when I started out, I mean, we came from a very poor family, and we just had to work our butts off to earn the money and get the education that we needed to be able to do this. And by not looking at cleaning up the things that I just drove back down from Vancouver, and if you drive along I-5 or 33rd Avenue in Northeast Portland up to the Columbia River, it's obscene, and people are moving out of there into the Beaverton and the suburbs to get away from that. And I think if you saw the Channel 6 documentary last night after the golf tournament, Is Portland Dying? It sure is. And what that's doing is inappropriately raising the cost of housings all over the metropolitan area. And so I think we need to look at our environment, absolutely, but global warming is something we're trying to predict 30, 40, 50 years from now. We have a mess right in our backyard right now, and that's causing people to move and inflating the cost of homes. And I'm also getting to the point where I'm getting very frustrated because I moved here in Beaverton in 1975, and all of a sudden, because I moved here and I didn't care who I lived next to. I came from the Army where we lived next to all kinds of people of color. And because I happened to move to Beaverton, all of a sudden I'm being categorized as a racist. I just think this is getting totally out of hand. And I'm getting very frustrated with this. I've had enough now.
Any comments or should we go on, Rob?
I mean, I heard his comments. I can't recall a specific question, but I'm happy to answer a specific question.
Yeah, what are you going to do about all the single family homes that are getting out of reach for everybody?
Well, the idea is that if we allow more housing options, then the price should go down. Because we're restricting supply, things are becoming more expensive.
But people aren't going to want to be in those kinds of houses. Eventually, they would love to be able to have a house like even a 1,850 square foot ranch or a split entry like in Highland Hills. And those are going, I mean, the prices of those are going up. They're going up. I think Jeff Gianola was talking about how houses in the metropolitan area, not so much the downtown area, are this last year grew 18%. And so, yeah, you might, I mean, affordable. And if you listen to that documentary, the affordable housing is not very affordable.
Okay, thank you, Frosty. I think you brought up a lot of big ideas, but we're gonna move on to the other.
I'd encourage everybody to listen to that Jeff Gianola Channel 6 documentary that was from about, I think, 6 to 7 o'clock last night. It was scary. And it's the, if we don't fix Portland, we're going to continue to see the increased cost of houses in the metropolitan area.
Thank you. Okay, Joe, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, Rob, this is just a little bit off. Are you familiar with the West End Apartments at Murray and TV Highway?
I think so. I can pull it up.
Yeah, it's 424 units. The studios rent for $1,300, one bedroom, $1,540, a two bedroom, $1,785. Now I called them up and asked them if they had any low income apartments, and they said no, they did not. And so my question to you is, has the city council ever considered, when this such a massive unit development comes online, why can't there be some low income units, maybe 10 or 15% of that 424 units as low income housing?
That's something we'll definitely be looking into. Something I didn't mention is that we are working with an economic consultant to look at the feasibility of each approach. They would be looking at one thing they'll be looking at would be potential displacement, but then they also would be thinking about the affordability of each homes. And then, I mean, this is, once we get that, we would then try to work with affordable housing developers to figure out what would be the best incentives for them to try to make this, to make it easier for them to build. So last week, we interviewed Habitat for Humanity, and we reviewed these options with them and tried to get their feedback on what might work for them. In a couple of weeks, we're going to meet with Proud Ground and talk to them. I don't know if you're familiar with Proud Ground, but they work with a community land trust model to provide affordable housing for people. And we have monthly meetings with our development division, and they're responsible for affordable housing. We're trying to find connections between all of these projects because that is something we do want to see, and we want to encourage it. Now, a lot of the housing types that this might produce could be market rate. It's not easy, I'll admit, to get affordable housing, but we do want to make it as easy as possible. So we'll just keep talking to the people and figure out what's going to make it easier for them to build.
Well, let me ask this follow up here. Can the city council decide that any apartment buildings that are built in the Beaverton area must have a certain percentage of low income housing? Can the city council have the authority to do that?
I think they could, but I'd like to confirm. I think any city council probably could, but whether or not they would, I don't know. But
I think Portland did several years ago, but there was no way to enforce it. There was no penalty for a developer to actually then follow through with that commitment to affordable housing. So it's complicated.
Something that we'll look at, it's a bit early for this stage, but after we basically come up with either one option or a hybrid approach, we will, as I mentioned, start to look at incentives. And something I know like other cities might do is say, okay, you can build a quadplex on this site. What if we allow you to build 2 more units if they're regulated affordable? Is that working? If it were market rate, you can build, you'd only be able to build 4, but if it's affordable, you know, you would allow 6. That's just one example of something we'd be looking at. And then we would bring that back to the public too, to figure out what it's going to take to get people to start building this stuff.
All right, thanks, Rob.
Sure.
Okay, I think next was Birgit, and then we'll go to Eric, and Konnette, and then we're going to move on to our next topic.
Okay. Thank you. So thanks, Rob, for putting this out. And I probably want to dig deeper into this and so on. To me, just saying some comments first and then have some questions. This looks like the big deal for developers. This is great for developers, you know, like you're making it all available for the developers, and it does not solve the problem of affordable housing. I mean, I know you said right at the beginning, this is something that state ordered. I have the question of what can be done to protest this in general to to the state or to the city, and you know, like, because this does not look at all attractive to me, and I would rather leave Beaverton than suffer to having a quadruplex here next door to me, something like that. And so have you probably, maybe not alone, but has that been taken into account where Beaverton would get their taxes from when the people leave? I mean, I'm suspecting that I'm not the only one who would do that. And additionally, you know, like, have you considered that? And have you, you know, like, it doesn't sound like this could be more affordable, but instead it would maybe to still cover the taxes of more people that come to, you know. Anyway, the point is, the question I have is, how has that been considered that people will leave with this kind of setting in place? And yeah, how much does it cost to engage and consultants for the economical outlook for what you mentioned? So those are my questions. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm sorry, I threw them all together there and
oh, that's okay, but I'm sorry, it's hard for me to hear.
Okay, let me think.
Yeah, if it were, it might be easier. I don't know if it's just my connection.
Okay, can you hear me better?
Oh, much better. I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, I had this on.
Sorry, I
I'm
didn't
so
mean to
sorry.
interrupt you.
So mumble around. Okay, first question is, or the statement I made was, I rather would leave Beaverton than have a quadruplex or something coming up beside me. And I know this is not necessarily my neighbor who's going to build this, but some developer. So this is a really great opportunity for developers to make a lot of money. Not me, obviously. So, but I would rather leave. So my question there is, has the city, have you guys thought about how this will affect your tax income? Secondly, how much does it cost to employ, or not to employ, but to pay yet another consultant to this project? And third, what can I do to protest this? Not on your level, because you're also following what the state government has said, said. So what can I do? Those are the three questions I have.
Okay, thank you. And sorry I didn't hear you before, but I heard those very well. So I mean, the last one is easier. What can I do to protest it? As you hit the nail on the head. It is state law. So there's really nothing that I or city council can do, because it's our mandate to comply with it. If people had issues with it, they should speak to their local state representatives. But there's, at the city level, city and county, we're pretty much in a compliance zone. Sorry if that's not what you want to hear, but
no, but
yeah.
If you don't do it, what happens?
Oh, okay, well, that's a good question. So if we don't do it, the state, they have come up with a backup code that would automatically kick in to effect on June 30th, 2022. So
yeah, I remember now. Sorry. Yep. Thank you.
And that one pretty much allows, it doesn't match anything we've suggested, but it allows housing everywhere. It's this balance of allowing housing everywhere with coming up with stricter design standards. That's the highest level takeaway. For consultants, how much do we pay for consultants? In the beginning, we've used several different consultants, and we often have state grants to pay for them. So it doesn't necessarily come out of the city of Beaverton's general fund. Our most recent economic consultant, gosh, I have not looked at that. I can look that up, but we'll come up with a list of questions. But yeah, I can't, sorry, I can't actually recall.
That's fine. Thank you if you give me that information. Sure. Like I just paid a lot of taxes. I'm not in the best mood about that.
Oh, no, I hear you. I just mailed my check too. It was not a refund. And how will this affect, I wrote down, how will this affect tax income? Do you mean your property taxes?
Yeah, property taxes really, how will it affect the county and whoever really benefits from the taxes that a property owner pays?
Well, what's interesting, and because we should have the economic report in mid-June, and that will be public, I can share that. So I can't tell you what it does to Beaverton because I haven't seen it. But what I've seen, like Washington County actually, their report was released about a month ago. And what they found was that it's really difficult to build these housing types. And it just wasn't feasible almost anywhere. So it's interesting because on the surface, when you look at a map, it looks like all these housings could be built everywhere, but they're so expensive to build and they just don't pencil out a lot. So the reality, I can't remember, I can share that. If people are interested in the Washington County report, I can try to send that if people are curious. But what they generally found was, I don't know if the number was between like 1% and 6% of lots could develop. It was very low, single digits. It might have even been lower than 1% in some places. But the idea was, if it doesn't even pencil out, then they don't expect to see much development, which would mean it's not going to affect the tax base too much. So I don't know if that's going to be the same story as for Beaverton, but Washington County's report does look at surrounding areas, Beaverton and Hillsborough.
So, I think I asked that question last time, it's that same area. Like, if I have this house here and theoretically a certain group of houses could be built on it, how is the tax evaluation happening on my property? Is it what it is now or what it could be?
My understanding was that it couldn't go up more than 3% per year.
That's a set way to, that's set, but it would, okay, that makes, yeah. But I'm just wondering, when it comes to the change of zoning, how that would affect it. But if it's always limited by that state rule of 3%, then that covers that.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to Eric Schmidt. And let's try, we're running a little bit over, so let's try to keep them a little brief. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your presentation, Rob. I really appreciate it. There's a rumor running around parts of my neighborhood that these fourplexes could be built in addition to the existing structure. And I tried to tell people, no, it would be the existing structure would have to go and then the new units would be built. Who's right, who's wrong here?
Well, there would be a cap on the number of units that would be allowed on one site. So if you have a single family home on a lot and you could now build, let's say, a quadplex, you could add 3 units.
In addition to the existing structure.
In addition to the existing structure, right. So then there would be 4. And
does this open the door to the granny flats and the small houses and that kind of stuff?
So accessory dwelling unit, I guess an easy way to look at it is that assume every dwelling unit counts as one dwelling unit. So if you have an ADU on there, it counts equal to a unit in a duplex or triplex. There's a lot of different scenarios you could work out, but essentially, if you had an ADU, a single family home with 2 ADUs, that could be considered a triplex. And in theory, you could add a new unit, but you couldn't get into some loop where like you keep building a house and adding an ADU. You can't do that. You would be limited to the total number of units on that site.
But what we could see is a lot of existing structures. Theoretically, we could see a lot of existing structures being leveled and multi-units being built on top of where that was.
You could, yeah, that's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Konnette, go ahead.
Can't hear you,
You're
hon.
muted.
Sorry. My question was about utility spaces on these lots. For instance, on the Echo number 2, is there a spot for an electric car to be plugged in? And do you consider where garbage pickup would happen and where those receptacles would be? Is there also some kind of an algorithm about what as you increase density but take away green space and that sort of thing, would there also be public spaces, green spaces added somewhere so that people would have that available? And is there an algorithm for things, for services, like as we increase density, like groceries and gas stations and that sort of thing, which we seem to be losing more of?
Well, okay. To answer your first question, for utility spaces on lots, our working assumption is that a 20-foot easement should be able to cover all utilities. And so if you're looking at options 2 and 3 on here, they could be underneath the green space in option 2, and they could be underneath the driveway in option 3. An electric car could be plugged in. I'm not familiar as much with the infrastructure. I know when they're plugged into garages. I don't know what it would take to have a standalone station, but that is something we can look into. And garage pickup. So we have a technical advisory committee where we'll start to look into more of the technical details of this project. That meeting is in June. We're pretty much at a more conceptual level now, but as we start to move to more the technical level, we would start to figure those things out some more. Where would green spaces be added? Most of these, the idea for this project is existing residential neighborhoods where there's already development. So I think where you're looking at Cooper Mountain, for the most part, these rules would apply. And that's when there would be more planning with, parks and trails and things like that. Would THPRD come in and add new green space? I don't know, but they are on our technical advisory committee. So when we meet in June, that is another question I can share with them. And I wrote down algorithm for services, but I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly what that
just as in density is increased.
Yeah.
How do you account for the services that will be needed?
So one thing we could look at is trying to allow, have different standards for housing near transit, and to try to support more, try to encourage more housing near those areas. And something that Cooper Mountain is doing, which we have not done ourselves, but if there really is more density in certain areas, do we look at allowing more corner stores or smaller pockets of activity so you could actually have more walkable neighborhoods that have services? That is something we could look at. I think we'd have to choose one of these options first, and then that would be a layered approach as we're developing it. Does that answer all of your questions?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, sure.
All right, thanks everyone for your questions. That was a really productive conversation. Thank you, Rob.
Real quick.
And if anybody has, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Well, real quick, Rob, can you put your email address on the chat line?
Oh, sure. Also, I'm going to send you this slide, but I have it on this slide, and I will put it in the chat. But
thank you.
Sure. And I know I didn't cover lots, so I'm just going to ask people. I know you've got a lot to share, so please go to the open house, and that's a great place to let me know. You can send me an email too, but I'd love to hear what you think, through our survey.
All right, committee members, if you have anything to say, take the survey and go to the open house. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we need to have the April minutes. Is there anyone with changes or comments about the April minutes? Okay, is there a motion to approve the April minutes as written?
I move to approve the April minutes as written.
No, second.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for a second, Joe. All those in favor, raise your hand of approving the April minutes. They've been approved. Thank you. All right, now over to Miles for the city update.
Good evening. I'm filling in for Lanny tonight. My city update is short since a lot of the things on it happened earlier in the month. There was a virtual event for the public to meet the city manager finalists. There's a recording of that video at beavertonoregon.gov/city manager. So if you weren't able to attend the live event, I encourage you to watch it. There was also a survey, but it is already closed, I believe. It wasn't up on the webpage when I checked earlier. And city council is expected to appoint the city manager in this summer, so soon. Cash Oregon and the Metropolitan Family Services have extended their free tax preparation and filing services through Thursday, July 15th to Beaverton residents. Beginning May 27th, assistance will continue after the deadline with services offered Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. You can learn more about the program at cashoregon.org. And finally, city council meetings moved to 6 p.m. instead of 6:30, at least through the current state of emergency. And as always, you can visit the agendas, view past council minutes, or view past council meetings and read the minutes at beavertonoregon.gov/city-council. Those are all the updates I have. And Rob mentioned the HOP survey and the open house, so please attend that.
All right, any comments or questions for Miles? All right, we'll move into subcommittee updates. Let's start with the event subcommittee with Joe.
Whoa, well, Eric, help me out here, buddy. You said we have not gotten any report from CTV TV about how many people watched the video on the forum. Is that correct?
We do not have that statistic, and I know that Lanny compiles some of them based on the streams. I don't know if Miles has those figures yet available. We have yet to compile how many views or hits we're getting now on the YouTube. So I think it's a work in progress, Joe.
Okay. Now I think we had some talk about possibility of a runoff for the city council. Do you think that's still going to happen?
As of this evening, just before we met, I checked the Washington County election site, and there are probably still 6,000 to 8,000 votes that need to be counted in the city of Beaverton. And right now, Ashley Hartmeyer-Prigg has 49% of those votes cast. Jerome Sabayan has about 38, 39%. If that trend holds and neither candidate gets 50% plus one, then by the rules of the game, there will be a special election in September 21st, set by state law. And that constitutes a runoff. And the thinking is that do we want to have another voters forum sometime around Labor Day to highlight these two candidates should they both be selected for the runoff?
What's your feeling? Should we have a voters forum?
Well, I really thought that there was a stark difference between the two candidates in our voters forum, and I think it might be more pronounced if we had a full hour to be able to devote to this particular race. And we could do an hour without any problem at all. We had plenty of questions. We had great questions, as a matter of fact. Thank you all for those of you who participated in that. And to have this would be a genuine public service, and to the citizens of Beaverton, to the voters of Beaverton, to one more time give them a little exposure. The rules of the political game are going to change a little bit. The candidates are already, we're already being told that they're going to start knocking on doors now that the mask mandate has been somewhat lifted. Right. So I think they'll have more of an opportunity to do some of the retail vote getting. But at the same time, the voters forum is a very important part of any campaign, and I think we ought to be ready to participate.
So it sounds like a good idea for me. I agree with that. Anybody else have any thoughts about that in the group here?
Would it still be virtual in September, do we think?
I hope not.
Right.
No, I'm serious, and I'm serious as a heart attack on this one. I really hope that we can get into at least City Hall with a limited number of people in council chambers, or we could go back to the big room in the library and we could limit the number of people there too. But to have that, and in addition to having TVC TV carry it live and of course streamed on the city website, I think it's a really valuable service. But to have the candidates in-house and being able to sit there, I think would make a big difference. And I think we're almost there. If all of the projections hold for everybody getting vaccinated and we're up to the 65 or 66% threshold, we'll find out. Washington County is now down at a lower risk level because we hit some kind of a threshold with vaccination.
Yeah.
But do we not need to organize that much earlier? I mean, then we need to reserve a place and all that kind of stuff, right?
That's why I'm bringing it up now, Birgit. I would like to have us start thinking about it so that Lanny and Miles could at least secure the library and or City Hall for a potential space, say sometime around September 3rd, 4th, 5th.
Okay, sounds good. Miles, I assume is here somewhere. He's hearing it, but we'll talk for sure. Any other thoughts from anybody about that issue? Okay, Ellen, I think that's about it for me.
Okay, was there any other feedback on the voters forum we just did? Any other comments or? All right. Let's go to land use. Terry.
Okay, hi. We had a subcommittee meeting, very brief, half hour, goes really fast. And we are at this point nailing down some of our final tasks, and the group volunteered to take on, I mean, really, we're talking loose ends here. Things that we have conceptualized all along and require extra script, etc. So we are really a rounding third. Hopefully, we will be able to share this with you guys in the next month or two anyway. So anyway, that's where we are there. We have all kind of taken on some final tasks that we're gonna accomplish shortly. But I did want to also mention a general land use item that's going to come to the Planning Commission on Wednesday night. Unfortunately, we overlapped the HOP open house. But there will be a text amendment that will be discussed regarding small wireless facilities. And basically, this is going to be the first step of officially deregulating a lot of these wireless facilities to be in compliance with FCC rules that basically say that they cannot be subject to land use discretion, and they need to be approved in from the day they enter the city to the day of the final decision, all has to occur within 60 days. So that pretty much eliminates most land use actions. So anyway, if you don't want to attend the hearing, there's a lot of the materials on those in our agenda, on the Planning Commission agenda, including draft text, which they always do the cross out and the addition on the text. So I think you'll be a little surprised or shocked, or maybe you know that this was coming down the pike. But anyway, text amendment 2021-0001. That was it. Any questions? Okay, thanks.
All right, and traffic calming. Konnette, go ahead. You're muted still.
I got
There
it.
you are.
We met after Terry's meeting to complete our discussion about what occurred on the NAC visits that we were asked to do by the Traffic Commission. There's was support, uneven support in those NACs, but a clear interest in the traffic calming process. What the most support for was some kind of a approach to changing the voting system so that it does not, so that a project isn't approved with no return ballots being included as no votes. In favor, in place of that, there would be a required percentage of designated voters returning their votes, and of that, a percentage of yes votes for a project to pass. We will be meeting with, we did have a city council meeting that I was able to go to that had met, and the council seems to be very much in favor of addressing the voting issue as well as in other issues that people are, residents are concerned about with the traffic calming process. So that we will be presenting to the Traffic Commission on June 3rd at 7 o'clock. And any questions? Nope.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other subcommittee items? Okay, so we don't have Sharon here for our actionable items. There wasn't much this week. The Housing Options Project survey and the open house. Anybody have anything else to add as just remember?
I just
Miles just has one, right, to check for library space for the voters forum.
Okay.
The library or wherever else we can find a room.
Yes.
Konnette, go ahead.
I just wanted to let everyone know we had 29 people attend the Zoom meeting for the Backyard Habitat Program that was open to all of the NACs. I don't know yet if we're able to tell you how many different NACs residents attended, but it was well received.
Thank you. Nice to hear that. Okay, anyone else? Anything else further before we sign off early? Any other items to bring up? I will thank you, everyone. Have a happy Monday, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Alan, and thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.